Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations. Just as I learned this past week, where I live here in Marpole, Vancouver, I'm actually on the land of the Setznam, which is a Musqueam village that's been here for at least 4,000 years. But I know where everybody else is, you're on the land of other nations. So at this time, let's just remember our connection to these people and honor them in letting us meet here on their land. And let's pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. Welcome. Welcome to Living Interfaith. Know that the whole of you is welcome. You're not asked to leave who you are in your own home. Please bring who you are in with you. But what you are asked to remember is that those around us have brought who they are in with them today as well. And all of goodwill are welcome. We'll start with some announcements. Today is Imamate Day, which is a very special holy day for the Ismaili Muslims. It's the birthday of the Aga Khan, and this is the day he became the Imam 63 years ago. So today we honor him, and we tell our Ismaili brothers and sisters a big Kushali Mubarak.
Kushali Mubarak.
Kushali Mubarak. Tomorrow, Sunday, July 12th, from 9 to 10 a.m., I'm actually going to be speaking at the West Vancouver United Church. I feel really honored. I've been asked to come up there to speak about what it means to be called to an interfaith life. So I think that should be really fun. I'm especially happy I'm not going to be running the tech stuff tomorrow now, so we don't have to worry about that. But if anyone would like to log in, I know on their website, and I believe on their Facebook page, they live stream their services. And I think especially for other interfaith and Baha'i folks, you might be interested in what we mean when we say an interfaith calling. So that should be fun tomorrow. Also tomorrow from 11 to 12:15, Dr. James Hollis will be giving an online talk about living between worlds, finding personal resilience in changing times. I guess this is going to be from a Jungian analyst perspective. So that'll take place online, and you can find the link on our website. On Thursday, July 16th, from 7 to 8, I think they're here. Let me just. Okay, there we go. At St. Andrews Wesley, they're going to have an all-ages Zoom meeting. It's going to be a gathering and a storytelling for kids, so they encourage everyone to come in their pajamas. They actually specified it starts just after 7 at 7:05, so that you're not pulled away from the 7 o'clock cheering for the healthcare professionals. And you can find the link on the website if you'd like to join. Next Saturday from 11 to 12:30, Rick Hansen is going to be speaking about Neurodharma, the 7 practices of the highest happiness. And that'll be from a Buddhist and a psychological perspective. And you can find that link on our site. And then finally, the following Wednesday, July 22nd, there's going to be a Reconciliation in Action talk with Nakota Elder Wilson Barehead and Indigenous Education Advocate Charlene Barehead. And that'll be from 7 to 8:15. And that link is also on our website. At this time, does anyone have any other announcements they'd like to make before we begin? Okay, thank you. Let's come into prayer. Glory be to you, O Lord. Thou art the God who hast existed before all things, who will exist after all things, and will last beyond all things. Thou art the God who knoweth all things, and is supreme over all things. Thou art the God who dealeth mercifully with all things, who judgeth between all things, and whose vision embraceth all things. Thou art God, my Lord. Thou art aware of my position. Thou dost witness my inner and outer being. Grant thy forgiveness unto me and unto the believers who responded to thy call. Be thou my sufficing helper against the mischief of whosoever may desire to inflict sorrow upon me or wish me ill. Verily, thou art the Lord of all created things. Thou dost suffice everyone, while no one can be self-sufficient without thee. Fire and paradise both bow down and prostrate themselves before God. That which is worthy of his essence is to worship him for his sake, without fear of fire and hope of paradise. God. Now, Bruce and Cheryl, if we'd like to do our opening song. They're there. Bruce and Cheryl are indeed here.
That one?
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Thank you so much. Now let's do a passing of the peace. This is where I try to unmute everyone and we say something like peace be with you as well. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. Peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Peace be with you, everyone.
And with you.
Peace, everyone.
With you, friends.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Open love.
Yes, love to all.
Good to be here.
I'm looking forward to a wonderful day.
Thank you all so much. Peace. And now Bruce and Cheryl.
Allahu Abba, 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 Allahu
Thank you. And now if you'll join me in our joint affirmation. We come together in peace. We sing together in joy and with love. We worship together in one house, a house with names beyond number. Our paths are many, our beliefs are as leaves, and the tree that we cleave to is nourished by the light of compassion, justice, and mutual respect. May our lives, our beliefs, and our actions help to bring about the world of love we all seek, and let it begin here. Thank you. At this time, this is when we all take a few moments to pray for something going on in our world or something that's dear to us. Unfortunately, as we know right now, there are so many different things we could be praying for. I think the thing I'm thinking about most today is just this idea of healing. We need healing at a personal, physical level, but also at an emotional and a social level. So if we could take a few moments now just to pray in our own way for healing in the world. Thank you. Thank you. Bruce and Cheryl. Thank you so much. At this time, if we were meeting in person, we would usually pass around a basket for donations. Instead, I can put the address for our donation page if anyone would like to donate. I was very excited recently to get a couple $10 monthly donations for us just to help pay for our musicians and for some of the things we're doing. So thank you so much for your generosity. And then if anyone has any other causes that are in need of support right now, if you could please tell us and or put them in the chat. That would be wonderful because that's how we all support each other. So we'd love to hear about them. Does anybody have anything else that needs some donations or attention right now? Okay, thank you. Bruce and Cheryl?
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to my friend, Harold Rosen. I'm very happy. I met Harold just a little more than a month ago at a pluralism conference that the Vancouver School of Theology was holding. And I loved listening to his talk on how all the world's religions can come together and we can support each other and find world peace. And since then, we've been communicating a lot about this. And I'm just so grateful he's here today to honor the Bab. So thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm utterly delighted to be here. You know, I call myself a Baha'i and a community interfaith educator. So I think it was absolutely inevitable that I was going to find this living interfaith sanctuary at some point. And it's been wonderful getting to know you, Kathy. And you know, the songs, I used to be a Unitarian minister for 25 years. And some of the songs were used in my church, like Come, Come, Whoever You Are, the words of Rumi. And the woman that turned that into a song became the minister in my old church in Idaho when I lived south of the border a long time ago. Yeah, so I feel a lot of connections. So I'm going to talk about the Bab briefly as I can, and his death and his significance. And I see him as a hinge of history. I tend to look at things from very broad perspective. So he was, to me and to Baha'is, a great historic turning point for humanity, and a figure of providential significance. We call him a forerunner, but he was more than a forerunner. But I like to compare him to other forerunners. You know, there was a forerunner for Moses, the Egyptian soothsayers, who said that a Hebrew deliverer was going to arise. And the Buddha had the monk Asita say that a prince was going to pave a new path to awakening. And Jesus had a forerunner, John the Baptist, who was preparing the way for a savior for the Jews, Greeks, and Romans, and whoever else wanted to be embraced in that gospel of love. And also Muhammad. There was Bahara, the Christian, and Salman the Persian. Both knew that there was going to be an Arabian prophet to arise. And before Baha'u'llah was the Bab, who announced that humanity is getting ready for the promised one of all ages. If you ask who is the Bab, you could say he's a historical figure. He had a name, Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi. That tells us he was from Shiraz in southern Persia. He lived between 1819 and 1850. Short life, short dramatic ministry. We say he's the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, but he was also a prophet and a messenger in his own right. And I think I'm going to try to show you why Baha'is believe that. His title is the Gate. This is how he's known to history, the Gate. He was the gate to the glory of God, or the gate to Baha'u'llah, or the gate to a united humanity, Baha'is believe. The Bab described himself as the Qayyim, or the return of the hidden Imam. He also said he was the Lord of the age and the bringer of the day of renewal. Elsewhere in Baha'i writings, it says that he was the center of a galaxy of God-intoxicated heroes, and the first trumpet blast of the new age. You know, if you talk about what was he like as a person, here's how his qualities were described. As a child, he didn't play with toys, but he would go under trees and pray for many hours at a time. And when the teachers in his schools would mention the Quran, he could comment on any verse of the Quran with great understanding. And this really mystified his teachers. People said that he was a person of engaging grace, kindliness, courtesy, dignity, serenity, very courageous and independent. And they always spoke of the masterful quality of his character and will. A thing about him that is sort of undisputed is that he seemed to know the thoughts and the aspirations of everyone around him. So this was a hint that all of his knowledge and wisdom was not ordinary, that he was, you could say his understanding was innate or God-given. I want to go back to this question about his place in history. If you think about the world in the beginning of the 19th century, you have to notice that there were 5 great powers of Europe, and they were carving up the world. They were carving up Asia and Africa and into spheres of influence. And I'm talking about the countries England, France, Germany, or Austria-Hungary, Prussia, and Russia. This was also the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So things were being invented whereby you could colonize the world and control the world. Turkey and Persia had been the strongest centers of power in the Islamic world. They were declining at that time and showing a lot of corruption and oppression. India and China had been very long-standing great civilizations. They too were in decline. So you might say that all the classical civilizations were in decline, including the Christian civilization, in the sense that standard Christian morals were weakening. People were having a more secular or power-oriented or competitive point of view. And if we speak of that era, those who were religious had intense millennial expectation. This was true not only in the Christian world, but in the Islamic world, also in India and China. I was very shocked to learn this, that millennial expectation was in many parts of the world. I just want to mention 5 regions. Of course, Jews were waiting for the Messiah or the Lord of hosts, and Christians for the return of Christ, who would usher in the divine kingdom. Hindus expected the return of Krishna or the Kalki avatar, who would usher in the golden age. Buddhists spoke of the Maitreya, the Buddha of universal fellowship, was going to usher in a universal Dharma realm. The Chinese also talked about a great sage who would bring about the grand unity. And Muslims were talking about the Qayyim, the return of the hidden Imam, or the descent of Jesus. So both the Sunni and the Shia Muslims were waiting for a day of renewal. So the millennial expectation is something very universal and shared quite widely and quite providential. If you look at those regions again, I want to say something about the West. In the West, even among secular people, there was a longing for a whole new day. There was sort of we could call this the Romantic movement in poetry. And I want to share just a few lines from a few great poets. Again, these were not particularly religious people, but they had this sense that something new was happening in the world. Tennyson wrote, "The night is ended and morning nears. Awake, look up, see the glory of 1,000 years." And Charles Kingsley wrote, "The day of the Lord is at hand. The nations sleep, starving on heaps of gold. But who would sigh for a lost age of gold while the Lord of the age is here?" And my favorite was because I was born south of the border. Julia Ward Howe wrote words that became a song, a patriotic anthem. "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. His truth is marching on." So millennial expectation is very, very broad. In different regions of the world, different traditions, even secular, romantic, literary traditions. There were prophecies that Baha'is say were pointing to the middle of the 19th century and pointing to the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the founders of the Baha'i Faith. Some of these are well known. I want to share just a few from Christian background and a few from Islamic background. "It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established, and all nations shall flow to it. They shall beat their swords into plowshares." From Isaiah, and also from Isaiah, "The government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." And Matthew said, "As lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." From Islamic traditions, Muhammad is reported to have said, "Verily in the year 1260, which in the lunar calendar would be the year 1844, the very time of the declaration of the Bab, in the year 1260, the tree of divine guidance shall be planted." In the Quran, it says, "The trumpet will just be sounded when all that are in the heavens and the earth will swoon. Then a second one will be sounded when, behold, the earth will shine with the glory of its Lord." Muhammad also said about 1400 years ago, "Should a youth from my tribe, that is Muhammad's lineage, should such a youth summon the people to a new book and to new laws, all should hasten to him and celebrate his cause." Now, there's a part of the Bab's teachings that I find utterly fascinating. Once upon a time, I taught comparative ethics. And so the Bab came up with what I call a universal moral imperative. And boy, I would love to talk on this for hours, but I just want to share a few things that he said. If you would have asked the Bab, to whom and to what are we ethically responsible? His answer was, to everyone and everything. Here's some of his own language. He says, "Be thou for God and his creatures. Be thou for God and his creatures, even as God hath been for his creatures. Act likewise in all conditions and with regard to all matters and phenomena. Perfect your own handiwork in all that ye produce with your hands. All actions should be performed as gifts offered to God." So essentially he's saying to us, we should act toward everything and everyone the way God acts toward everything and everyone. We should help them perfect themselves. We should become more and more perfect ourselves. We should be fostering development everywhere. We should be making earth a heaven. Here's a prayer, short prayer by the Bab that brings this theme to the front. O my God, thy handiwork hath always been complete, all-encompassing, perfect, and unfailing. And it will always continue to be perfect, unfailing, complete, and all-encompassing. Thou hast commanded thy servants to produce handiwork with the utmost perfection. For verily thou hast desired by this law to build the earth anew through the hands of thy servants. Of course, the Bab paved the way for Baha'i principles, and I just wanted to share very quickly some of the main Baha'i principles: the essential oneness of humanity, the valuing of cultural diversity, independent investigation of truth. That's very near to my heart as sort of a philosopher type, theologian type. The elimination of all prejudices, essential oneness of religions, and progressive revelation. In other words, all religions are part of one unfolding story. The complementary nature of science and religion, the absolute equality of women and men, and universal education, meaning everyone, everywhere, should have access to the bounties of knowledge and wisdom and beauty that have been produced by humanity. I want to read to you the words that the Bab shared with his first disciples, and I feel like these are directed not only to his 18 disciples back in 1844, but to everyone who has sort of a global-minded and open-hearted attitude, anyone committed to the welfare of humanity. These words apply to them. O my beloved friends, you are the bearers of the name of God in this day. You have been chosen as the repositories of his mystery. It behooves each one of you to manifest the attributes of God and to exemplify by your deeds and words the signs of his righteousness. The very members of your body must bear witness to the loftiness of your purpose, the integrity of your life, and the exalted character of your devotion. For verily I say, this is the day spoken of by God in his book. Let your light shine before the eyes of men. Into whatever city you enter, proclaim and teach the cause of God. You are the witnesses of the dawn of the promised day of God. Purge your hearts of worldly desires and let angelic virtues be your adorning. Scatter throughout the length and breadth of this land, and with steadfast feet and sanctified hearts, prepare the way for the promised one of all ages. I'm going to wrap up soon, but I want to tell you a quick story about the Bab. You know, his ministry was 6 years long, and wherever he went, there were people who loved him, and there were people who were threatened by his power, his eloquence, and so he was persecuted, and his followers were persecuted. Maybe 20,000 were killed. But one particular story interests me. I'll only tell you part of it. There was a man named Wahid. Wahid was considered the wisest, most knowledgeable man in Persia at that time. So he advised the king and the prime minister, and they said to Wahid, would you mind investigating this guy who calls himself the Bab? Because he's causing a lot of disturbance. Whatever you say about him, we will follow because we trust your judgment. So Wahid, a great scholar, was planning to prove to everyone that the Bab was a charlatan. He had plenty of questions to ask him about the Quran and about the traditions. And he found that the Bab gave very simple and eloquent and accurate answers to all his questions. And he set up another meeting with the Bab, and this time he had another set of questions. And by the time he met the Bab the second time, he was very ashamed of himself, and he was starting to be afraid that God was condemning him for his attitude of arrogance toward the Bab. And he forgot all the questions that he was going to ask. But the Bab seems to have known those questions and answered every one of them very, very carefully. And in the third discussion, the Wahid had said, well, there's a surah number 108 in the Quran. It's called something like the River of Paradise or the Fount of Abundance. Very short, only 3 verses in that surah. He wanted to ask the Bab to comment on that because Wahid had his own theory about that surah. And the Bab not only commented on it, he wrote in calligraphy revealed verses, 2,000 verses about those 3 verses. And the Wahid almost fainted several times while this was happening. So to make a long story short, Wahid became one of the best teachers of the Babi Baha'i cause in maybe a dozen cities in Persia. I'm going to close by telling you the story of the martyrdom of the Bab. There was this young youth named Anis who wanted to serve the Bab up until the very end, always be with the Bab, follow him. And the Bab granted Anis this privilege to serve with him until the end. In the year 1850 in Tabriz in northern Persia, the Bab and his youthful devotee Anis were suspended by ropes before a firing squad of 750 soldiers because the clergy had finally decided to eliminate Persia of this disturbance of the Bab's new cause. There was a multitude of onlookers numbering 10,000 people, some of whom were European and Russian ambassadors who recorded exactly what happened. After the regiment fired upon the Bab and Anis, and after the smoke cleared, the Bab was nowhere to be seen, and Anis was standing on the ground unharmed. Later on, they found that the Bab was back in his cell, completing instructions to his secretary. And when they found him, he said, "Now you may proceed to fulfill your intention." So they tied up the Bab and Anis again, and another firing squad was ready. And the Bab's final words were these: "Had you believed in me, O wayward generation, every one of you would have followed the example of this youth and willingly would have sacrificed himself in my path. The day will come when you will have recognized me, and that day I shall have ceased to be with you." So then the 2nd regiment of 750 soldiers fired and killed the Bab and his devotee, but their faces were found to be very serene and untouched. There was a great wind and a dust and a great darkness that settled upon Tabriz. Later on, Baha'u'llah, a follower of the Bab, directed the movement of the Bab's remains through Isfahan and Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, Akka, and all the way to Mount Carmel in Palestine. Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, in 1909, had a marble sarcophagus built for the Bab. And in 1953, a shrine of light was completed, a beautiful golden dome with 18 windows. Beautiful gardens and terraces were built on Mount Carmel. This is one of the most stunningly beautiful sights in the whole world. So the Bab prepared the way for Baha'u'llah, who Baha'is believe is the glory of God, the bringer of world unity, universal peace, the spiritual maturation of humanity over several centuries, and the bringing about of an ever-advancing global civilization and world peace. I'm going to close with some prayer lines from the Bab. O God, my beloved, my heart's desire, enable all the peoples of the earth to gain admittance into the paradise of thy faith, so that no created being may remain beyond the bounds of thy good pleasure. From time immemorial thou hast been potent to do what pleaseth thee, transcendent above whatsoever thou desirest. Thou art the Lord of bounty and grace, invincible in thy power, the most skillful in thy designs. No God is there but thee, the all-possessing, the most exalted. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you so much, Harold. That was just so powerful and beautiful. It's amazing how much impact he had in just 6 years. And then knowing that that was just the start. And hopefully, indeed, this will be the beginning of the one universal religion and world peace. So thank you so much. I'm going to share our closing song. It's actually, let me see here. I'm just going to share my screen and then I will find it in that way. So I believe this is a friend of Harold's, and she's given us permission to sing this, share the sound. So this is The Remover of Difficulties.
By Shadi.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Harold. Thank you all for joining us today. Let us go in love, go in peace, and go help to bring about this world where we can all live together. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Harold.